all, it's Ellie and welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. If you are returning here for my 31 days of Halloween, hello. If you don't know what that is, I will be posting a new video every single day of October till we have a countdown of the best day of the year, which is obviously Halloween. For today's video, I thought we would take a look at some murders that were committed on Halloween Day. But just as a heads up, although these crimes are involved in my countdown to Halloween, please know I still want to cover these mini cases with full respect to the victims and anyone affected by any of these cases I speak about. If for some reason any of the topics I do talk about are triggering, just look in the description box and I will have helplines and resources there. So yes, this is a video of 3 murder cases that took place on Halloween. Some are longer than others just because some have had more media coverage than other cases have, so I just worked with what I could, and yeah, let's begin. Now, as we all know, with Halloween being the best time ever, it's cold, it's creepy, it's scary, it's just overall brilliant. You have all the excuses in the world to watch horror movies. It's also dark earlier, and one big thing is you can get free sweets on Halloween. Now I'm a lot more grown, and as I got older, I realised that knocking on strangers' doors to receive free sweets is actually kind of twisted, but like, I'm still going to do it because, like, who says you're too old? But actually, I probably won't. I don't really like people, so I'm kind of just going to stay in, eat food and watch horror movies. But what if I told you that back in 2011 a murder was committed over missing sweets? Like, an actual person ended another individual's life because their sweets went missing. So yeah, you probably think this isn't true, and maybe a 5-year-old could kick off over sweets, but the fact a 50-year-old grown man done just that. On the 31st of October 2011, a 49-year-old woman named, it could be Maria or Mariah, but I'm just going to say Mariah. 49-year-old Mariah Adams, who was from the south side of Chicago, was at the home of her boyfriend, Lydell Peoples. He was a 55-year-old grown man, and it was at his house that he decided to start digging into some of his Halloween snacks. This included Hershey's, Jolly Ranchers and Tootsie Rolls, although it turns out he couldn't actually locate where his sweets had gone. After searching for his sweets himself, he would then turn to Mariah and accuse her of stealing them. She denied this accusation, and this kind of instantly sent Lydell into a violent rage. The two of them had started to have an argument, and then Mariah decided to chuck a plate at his face, and this actually resulted in the plate smashing and it cut his head. But although I'm not trying to justify violence anyway, the throwing of a plate then turned the argument into an even more raging argument that just escalated, and then Lydell decided to grab several steak knives, and around 2:30 p.m. he decided to stab Mariah viciously. The police were obviously called, and then an ambulance took Mariah to a nearby hospital, but she did die of her injuries upon arrival. Upon his arrest, Lydell attempted to defend himself by explaining that his Halloween candy had been taken. This may be true, but I don't think the court are going to back you up in saying that was a valid reason to end someone's life. Obviously, the police didn't buy into this story and continued to arrest him on a $2 million bond. He was arrested and charged with attempted murder and aggravated domestic assault. Officers did reveal that they believed that his charges were hopefully going to be upgraded into a different degree of murder, a more serious one. But I can't actually find his full sentence or any more because I can only really find news articles for the story. But I just hope that some form of justice has been served because a woman lost her life over some Halloween sweets. Our next murder on Halloween is the murder of Derek Grain. Now, this case takes place in England, and it's kind of more known as the Brandon Hill Park murders. But in late October 1980, Derek Grain had now spent 2 months in Bristol. He was temporarily working for a British Aerosmith in nearby Filton. He was known as kind of being a jolly guy, and when he would have a night out on the town, he would enjoy quite a few drinks, but was not someone that would participate in bar fights or arguments in general. This fact made his fate even more shocking to those that knew him. On the evening of October the 30th, Derek had gone out to 2 nightclubs. They were both on Park Street, and at around 2 a.m. on the 31st of October, he left the final nightclub and then was going to be returning home to his hotel room at the Unicorn Hotel. However, for some unknown reason, which still kind of baffles detectives, Derek decided to walk a different way back to the hotel that he would actually never end up returning at. It was only later that morning a nurse discovered him dead in the pool of his own blood on Brandon Hill. He was lying face down, and post-mortem would show that he was beaten to death with a rather strange and uncommon weapon. It was a sand-filled traffic cone that was found 240 feet away from Derek's body. It also showed that Derek's attacker or attackers had repeatedly kicked his body while he was lying on the ground. The motivation for this murder appeared to be robbery. Derek's bank cards were scattered around the crime scene, and between £50 to £60 had been stolen from his pocket. A possible theory is that the murderer or murderers saw Derek dropping large amounts of cash at the club and decided that it would be a good idea to follow him, and seems to be spending a lot of money. He may have a lot of money on him, so they thought it would be a good idea to mug him. Aside from the murder weapon, another clue was found on the back of Derek's shirt. It was a bloody footprint. Once the murder information went public, the police luckily did have a few leads that would soon surface, and several witnesses came forward to describe that 3 or 4 men attacking a lone victim near Clifton Hill at around 3 a.m. A red Jaguar sports car, not normally reported being seen in the area, was also lurking around the streets of the crime. Unfortunately, none of these leads went pretty far, and sadly over the years, even with better technology, forensics still have not managed to shed any more light on this murder. Analysis of the traffic cone provided little useful information, and in 2009 the pockets of Derek's clothes were sourced in hope to find some DNA left by whoever killed him. But just like now and back in the 80s, there is still no leads, leaving this case unsolved. This final mini case for today's video is the murder of Aparna Janaga. It could be Janaga, I'm not too sure, but my apologies, no offence. I am just so useless at pronouncing names, so I do apologise. Aparna grew up in one of the largest cities in India. She was the eldest of 2 daughters. Her parents were BC and Nirmala Jinaga. Her father was a professor of computer engineering and her mother was a housewife. Aparna, while growing up, would show a passion for art, writing and gymnastics. It was as she got older, she would actually have the same love for technology, just like her father. As her skills in this department just got better and better as she left her teens and started her adulthood, she was for sure ready for a career in this industry. In June 2005, she was also featured in the New Indian Express under an article titled Young Inventors. After attending a university to broaden her career path, she decided to take a huge leap in her career and moved to the United States and attend the university in New Jersey. She would graduate with a master's in electrical engineering in December 2007, and instead of returning home to India, she decided that for her career it was probably best if she was to move to Washington. With her bubbly personality, she quickly made friends and had her own little social bubble. She would volunteer at the Redmond Fire Department and would also help out at animal shelters. She also thought she would live life to the edge, and she also got herself a motorcycle, even though she had no history in it, but she was willing to push herself. Now 24, she's absolutely living her life to the fullest. She was an innocent soul that always wanted to help others. When October 31st, 2008 came round, her friends and family's lives would change forever and they wouldn't even know straight away. It was a Friday and a few work colleagues decided that they would open up their apartments to have a Halloween party. Once she finished work, she stopped by some shops to pick up some snacks and some Halloween decorations. As the night went on and a load of friends were going in and out of different apartments, hopping between, I think it was between 4 apartments in this complex, they were just enjoying their night. Aparna would actually get into a verbal argument with another male partygoer. Witnesses would recall this incident as a race-related argument based off of a comment he had said, but with intent of still enjoying her night, Our partner quickly brushed off the argument and decided to try and enjoy the rest of it. It was around 3 a.m. on November the 1st. The party began to die down and some guests were leaving, so she decided to go back to her apartment and get some sleep. Over the next hour or so, some neighbours on both sides of her apartment would recall hearing noises which sounded like consensual sex taking place, and both apartments thought that the moaning they could hear was coming from her actual apartment. It was around 8 a.m. that one of the neighbours would also recall hearing a terrible growl noise which went on for around 20 seconds and then it finished with a solid thud. He then heard the sound of water running in her apartment and that lasted for around an hour. But as the day went on, he wasn't caught up on it because water noise is shower noise. That's a rather common thing, so he had no questions. So even though our partner hasn't been back to India for more than 2 years, she would still talk to her family over the phone regularly, giving updates on her life as well as just checking in and seeing how her family are doing. So she last spoke to her family on the 30th of October, but even though the weekend had passed and Halloween had come and gone real quick, her family had still no contact from her. This was actually very out of character for her, and normally if she was to ring and she was super busy, she would let them know that she was busy and she would contact them as soon as she could. By Monday, nobody had heard from her and she hadn't actually showed up for work that morning. One of her co-workers would try and call her, but they actually got no answer. At the same time, her family were also trying to contact her. They still hadn't heard from her since the Thursday before. So her family actually would eventually reach out to one of her friends to check in on her. Her friend's name was Jay, and he would get to the apartment around 9 a.m. and he saw one of her neighbours, who was nicknamed CJ, was also nearby. They decided to both go into her apartment together to check on her. They knocked on her door and it actually swung open. So it was now that they realised that the door lock had actually been busted into. With both of them now in her apartment, Jay and CJ briefly scanned it, and this is where they would come across our partner's body lying on her floor, already in the process of decomposing. They called the police, and the police would tell the boys to leave the apartment but to stay close by. Her house was obviously searched, and with what investigators were finding, it indicated homicide. There were signs of physical struggle and potential signs of sexual trauma. She was flown back to India for a Hindu burial, and just like any other loving family, her family really did struggle with coming to terms with what happened. Evidence showed that she was subjected to violent assault and rape, which would be later confirmed by autopsy. The killer had kicked in the front door to her apartment, which had been locked beforehand, but not only the doorknob itself, but also with a deadbolt. The damage left behind made it evident that the killer had entered through brute force, and from there proceeded to have a tumble and struggle with our partner. The apartment was discovered in a rather messy state from how it looked days beforehand. This was during the Halloween party, which made it clear that there was a struggle that ultimately led to her bedroom. This is where her body was also discovered. It was nude, bloody, and it was lying face down on the floor beside her bed. The autopsy would reveal that she was strangled to death roughly 2 days before her body was discovered. This meant that she had been killed sometime on the morning of Saturday, November the 1st, which would correlate to the hours just after when she went back into her apartment alone from the Halloween party. She had been covered in numerous liquids, including bleach and motor oil, which the killer had undoubtedly used to try and cover up the crime scene. As investigation went on, they did manage to recover DNA from the crime scene. The problem was that it actually belonged to 3 different people. DNA from a bootlace that was found was actually tracked back to a man that had a valid alibi. DNA belonging to a man named Emmanuel Fair, a convicted sex offender who raped a 14-year-old girl in 2004, was on her neck as well as on duct tape. A dressing gown that was stained with her blood was found in a bin nearby. It also had DNA of the 3rd man that was actually her own next door neighbour. It was also the same guy that was present when her family friend had to come in and check on her. His DNA was found on the bottle of motor oil, which was in the bin, as well as the dressing gown. The neighbour further aroused suspicion when he tried to destroy evidence that he had actually called her the night that she was killed. In fact, he was actually the last person to call her before she was murdered. He also attempted to flee to Canada. Despite this, he was actually never charged with the murder due to lack of evidence. Emmanuel Fair was charged in 2010. His first trial ended with a hung jury in 2017 and he was acquitted in June of 2019. During the second trial, the neighbour testified but had asserted his Fifth Amendment right against saying anything that could incriminate him, so he could only be asked so much. Additionally, it had been previously ruled out that prosecutors couldn't argue that Emmanuel and the neighbour killed her together, as the evidence for this theory was deemed insufficient. A juror later told the press that the main reason that Fair was acquitted was that the jury couldn't be sure that if it was the neighbour that murdered her on his own, if there was an accomplice to murder. The sad truth of this is that we may never know what actually happened to this poor girl, so no real justice will be served. I'm sure her family have very high suspicions of who committed it, but with not enough evidence, their justice may never be served. But yeah, that pretty much wraps up this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like, comment, share and subscribe. Comment below if you have any crime cases you would like me to look into. Please be sure to also subscribe because I'm posting a new video every single day for my countdown to Halloween. Thanks again for watching. Be sure to stay safe and I will see you in my next video. Peace.